Starting a few slides in already. Can you start it over again? Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad to see you all here. I'm so glad that I was able to make it here. I'm sure that some of you heard that I had a little bit of trouble getting here. We were, I think, a little bit worried for a few minutes there that I was not going to be able to make it here for this boot camp at all. And I am so thrilled that I'm able to be here with all of you in the first ever FIAPO boot camp. It's really, really exciting. It's so great to see you guys all here. It's so great to see you up in the morning. And this presentation this morning is called Striking at the Roots, and we are going to get a little bit into what that's going to mean. But it's about building community, mostly, and it's about raising awareness in that community. Like she said, my name is Michael Webermann. I'm the executive director of a group called Farm Animal Rights Movement, and she said that our mission is to end the cruelty to animals, and that's somewhat true. But it's a little more than that. Our mission is actually to create a world where animals are no longer used or killed for food whatsoever. There we go. To create a world where we don't use animals for food at all, because we don't need to, right? And so I want to get everyone a little more energetic this morning. Like she said, I'm very energetic myself. So I'm wondering who is here to save animals? Can you just clap? Raise your hands, please. Maybe clap. Who's here to save like a lot of animals? Like a lot of animals. Can I hear it? With your voices too. Can I really hear it? Can I hear it? All right, there we go. All right. So over these next 2 days, we are going to become even better at this than we already are. I'm sure all of us are already doing some great work to advocate for animals. We're going to be learning how to do even greater work from all of each other. But one thing that I'm sure most people in this room have noticed is that we tend to pay more attention to some species of animals than we pay to other species of animals. And I think we all agree that that's no longer right. That's not going to work any longer. That if we're going to create a kinder world for all animals, then we need to include all animals, even the ones like chickens and fishes that we don't tend to think about quite as often. Because it is easier, right? It's easier for us to pay more attention to the animals that we see right on the streets than the animals who are hidden in the dark, out of sight. Even though sometimes it's the exact same species of animals, right? But the ones that are hidden far away, we don't pay as much attention to. And it makes sense, right? It's not even necessarily a bad thing. It's only a starting point. It's not an ending point to only pay attention to those animals who are in our vicinity, who are near us. Obviously, the starting point has been wonderful for India. The fact that there's such an effective movement to end the cruelty being done to dogs on the street has led to some of the greatest animal protection victories in the planet, basically. To one of the, my numbers went out of order, that was not intended, but to one of the first animal cruelty acts, to the Animal Welfare Board, and now to all the grassroots enforcement that many of you yourselves are doing to maintain this momentum for animals. And so it's certainly not a bad thing when we start with the animals that we see, when we start with the animals in our vicinity. And in fact, that's how I got started myself as well in the US. When I was, most people in the US have either a dog or a cat in their homes. Maybe a lot of dogs, a lot of cats in their homes. I grew up when I was a kid with 3 cats, but I also grew up with 1 dog who was my best friend when I was a little kid. I apparently dressed exactly the same when I was 11 as I do now. And I grew up with my dog Ruffy, and he was my best friend. More than any human was, more than my parents were. No offense, Mom, if you watch this talk eventually. He was my best friend. But of course, what I was never thinking about was the fact that while I was doing so much to love and protect this one animal, I was consuming so many other animals, right? I know that probably many of us in this room actually didn't grow up eating animals. But in America, everyone grows up eating animals, right? Everyone. I ate meat literally 3 meals a day, and I'm not exaggerating. I ate meat every single meal of every single day, basically, growing up. Mostly chicken. I was obsessed with it. I ate so much chicken. I don't know if I could ever do enough good work to atone for all of the chicken that I ate in my first 14 years. But I was lucky to have a rebellious phase that's not the, I have that picture there, I remember. I changed some of the slides last night, and I kind of forgot my sequence a little bit. What I was going to say is that one thing that made my bond with my dog, similar to maybe some of the dogs here, is that he was rescued from a cruelty situation. This is not him, but this is a US dog fight. And the big dog is training on the little dog, the emaciated dog, and that's what my dog was intended to do. He was going to be a training bait for one of the bigger, more vicious dogs to teach them how to effectively dogfight. And my dog had a bad personality. He was not very nice, but my dad realized he was going to die in this dogfight training and rescued him anyway, and that's where I was able to form this bond with my dog, Ruffy. And then what I was going to say after that is that I was lucky enough to have a rebellious phase when I was a teenager. And in my rebellious phase, I had what, at least in the US, what we often call, we call it a light bulb moment. When finally something makes sense that you never thought of before or never made sense to you before. And for me, what that was our relationship to animals. What happened was I was sitting in my French language class when I was 14 years old. And we were learning, so in America, most of us just learn how to speak one language, just English, up until we're a teenager, which is really a terrible way to do it because by the time you're a teenager, it's so much harder to learn a new language. But I was 14 and I was learning how to speak French for the first time. And we were taught how to say the names of farmed animals in French. And then we were taught how the French say the noises that farmed animals make. So for instance, in English we say that a pig goes oink. In French they say that a pig goes groin groin. And so that kind of made everyone in the room laugh when we were 14 years old, and we were all kind of thinking about these animals more. And then right after that we learned how to say their cuts of meat in French. And for me, that was my light bulb moment, is that I had never thought of animals and the sounds they make and then the products that they become all in the same sentence before. Obviously I was aware of it, right? I wasn't stupid. I knew that meat came from animals. I just never thought about it before. And I think what really offended my kind of punk rock rebel sensibilities was I was really mad that no one had ever asked me to think about it before. No one wanted me to think about that, right? And it really, really bothered me. And so I became a vegetarian overnight after that. And I had never met a vegetarian, to my knowledge at that point, but I became a vegetarian, and I became a vegan shortly thereafterward, and it launched my career into animal advocacy. And what I learned is that just by eating a vegan diet, because of how much meat Americans eat, I was now saving 100 animals every single year from being born and raised for food. And so my dog, Ruffy, lived for 15 years. I saved one animal in that 15 years. I've now been vegetarian for 15 years. I saved 1,500 animals in the amount of time that I saved literally one dog. And for less effort, right? All I had to do was stop eating something I was eating. I didn't even have to really do anything. And so for me, that was really big, really, really big, is realizing that if I was to call myself an animal lover, I couldn't merely care about the animals that I saw in close proximity. I had to care about animals no matter how small they were, or if they lived in the water rather than if they lived in the land. That if I was going to, call myself an animal lover, I had to really mean it. And one thing that helped me do that was learning how intelligent and how richly emotional lives these animals lead. When I learned that cows have best friends on farms, and if they get separated from those cows, that their milk production will drop because they get so sad. That was a really big moment for me. I learned recently, this was a brand new article, it was all over the US, different variations of it. Goats are smarter than you think. According to the University of London, goats are able to learn new tasks in just 4 attempts. They can remember how to carry out these tasks almost a year later. They're quick to learn. They possess excellent memories. I had no clue. I don't think almost anyone in the US knows these kind of things. Really big one for me was this evidence that came out that chickens feel empathy. And so scientists are saying that domestic chickens display the signs of empathy that are able to feel another's pain at the heart of compassion. Thinking of chickens as compassionate animals, I think, can really change our entire worldview on how we relate to other animals. And finally, even fish. Scientific studies now showing that fishes are socially intelligent creatures, and they are cunning, manipulative, and even cultured. And if we can start to think of the word culture as applying to fish, you know, we can reimagine almost anything with our relationship to animals, right? But of course, the other big thing with doing this work for the animals that we don't so often see, the animals that we don't so often have to think about, is it's not just how amazing these animals can be when they're treated well, when they're in good situations, but it's also how bad these animals have it as standard practice. Certainly in the Western world, in the US and in most of Europe and now in South America, but unfortunately practices that are being exported to India, being exported to China, the largest growing market in the world for animal products, now taking on the worst of Western practices in many ways. And so cows on dairy farms being immediately separated from their mothers because we want to have that milk right away. We want to get the milk from the mom the first day that cow is born, and so these moms are perpetually impregnated. Chickens for eggs. Now in India, 80% of eggs come from chickens raised in battery cages, and cages so small the hens can't even turn around or spread their wings. Chickens for meat, with India being the largest growing market for chickens in the entire world right now, fastest growing market in the world. Chickens for meat being raised in large windowless sheds where they never even get to leave the shed once until the last day of their entire lives. And fishes, either being factory farmed now in basically concrete cesspools, or being pulled out of the ocean at such large rates that we're depleting almost every fishery in the world. And so it's, you know, it's not just, again, how amazing these animals can be, but what's happening to these animals as standard practice across the world. And it's not just the animals themselves, it's also having a major impact, as I'm sure most people know, on our environment. The United Nations came out with a report almost 10 years ago now. It's been updated a few times since, but the basic findings remain the same. The biggest one is that it estimates that the livestock industry is responsible for 18% of all global warming, a bigger share than all of transport. So every boat, every plane, every train in the entire world combined creates less global warming than just all the cows and chickens that we're raising for food do. Secondary, the report found that livestock production accounts for 70% of all agricultural land use and 30% of just all land surface use, period, on the planet. So 30% of all of the land used for any reason on this planet is used to house animals that we then go on and eat, rather than housing people, or rather than housing food that we can eat directly ourselves. And finally, that animal agriculture is the largest source of water pollution in the entire world, and one of the largest sources of air pollution. And so when you're seeing, you know, cities in India becoming more polluted in the air, knowing that it's not just cars contributing to that, but it's also the animals that we eat. And so, you know, the question from there basically becomes, why is this, and what do we do about it? And it's really an issue of supply and demand. When we increase our demand for these products, the production of these products increases. When production increases, obviously the supply increases. And finally, once that supply increases, the price decreases. And what happens when the price decreases? The demand increases. And the cycle continues and gets worse and worse and worse. And so when we talk about striking at the root, that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about striking at demand. Because it's the growing demand for these separated body parts that we see right here that is creating this that we see right here. And so we're going to go through some tools that farm has found work in the U.S. And there is, there's some good news with this. That farm, as well as a lot of other U.S. and European-based groups, have found that when we do effective work to strike at the roots, we actually see results. And so in America, for decades upon decades, the overall trend in animal consumption was up. It would go down for little bits, but overall it was going up. And about 7 years ago, we saw a rapid drop. And that drop has just gone down and down and down. And for the first time in almost a century, animal consumption in the US is going down consistently. And therefore, the number of animals being killed in the US is going down consistently. It's really good news. But the reason is because of all the work being done. No coincidence that at the same time that all these groups that you saw a second ago expanded their work dramatically, that all of our budgets grew, that all of our ability to work grew, that our staff grew, is the same time that we saw this work, this drop happen. And so I'm going to go through 10 ways that I believe we can strike at the root of animal oppression and that we can bring about a kinder world for animals. And some of them aren't even related to farm animals. Some of them you're already doing in this country far better than the US is even doing. And some of them I think the US has kind of pioneered, and hopefully we can learn from each other on these. So here are the 10 tools quickly, and we're going to go through them in more detail, so no need to write these down or memorize them. Just wanted to give us an opportunity to see them all together. And so we're going to start with the ones that you're most familiar with and maybe get to some of the ones that I think you're less familiar with. So the programs India is doing to pioneer animal birth control is striking at the root. And that's why I wanted to start with it, because it's not, doing this, when we spay or neuter a dog, we're not just helping that dog, right? We're preventing future dogs from ever having to be born, from ever going onto the street, from ever suffering. And that's striking at the root, right? Striking at the root means stopping future animals from ever having to suffer, rather than just stopping the animals from suffering that we see in our own vicinity. And so what you all are doing is a fantastic example already of getting to the root of this animal oppression. Secondarily, India is doing a fantastic job shutting down illegal operations of both cows and dogs. And this also strikes at the root because it not only saves the animals that are being taken from the illegal operation, but it sends a message, right, to the rest of the operations that this is not tolerated, that when we see this happen, we're going to stop it. It makes it harder for them to operate to begin with. And that's an excellent way to prevent animals from ever having to be used and killed and abused to begin with. Something that we can all do from our own computers, basically, and I'm sure we're all very experienced at it already, is sharing on social media. And sharing is the key word. When you're on Fiapo's Facebook page, don't just hit that like button. Don't just hit that comment button. That preaches to the choir, right? That just tells each other that you like something that everyone here already knows each other like. But make sure you share it on your own Facebook page too, because there's been a lot of evidence to show, statistical evidence in the US and Europe to show that when people share things on Facebook to people who aren't yet followers of that cause, that's what brings new people to that cause. And so it's a way to grow the animal protection movement to people who are currently not even involved, and getting them involved in an easy way, which is social media, before we ask them to take more concrete actions on the street. And speaking of concrete actions, distributing leaflets is probably the easiest effective action that one can take. I'm not saying it's the single most effective, but it's the easiest effective action that one can take. And it might just feel like you're putting a piece of paper in someone's hand, but you're really not. When you hand out leaflets, you're actually saving animals. An organization called the Humane League in the US has a department called the Humane League Labs. And they don't mean laboratories like testing on animals, they mean laboratories like testing what works to help animals. And so they did a big follow-up survey of what happens when people receive a leaflet. How many people go fully vegetarian or vegan, how many people become partial vegetarians or partial vegans. And what they basically found is because of the dietary change that happens when people see these leaflets and read them, that every 2 leaflets you hand out, saves one animal, basically, because of the future animals that people stop eating afterward, on average. So some people get a leaflet, they throw it away, they never read it. Some people get a leaflet, they read it, but they aren't that affected. Some people get a leaflet, they read it, and they reduce their meat consumption. And some people get a leaflet, and they go fully vegan right there on the spot. And averaged all together, every 2 leaflets you give out is going to save 1 animal. Which means if you spend 1 hour handing out 100 leaflets, you might have just saved 50 animals, 50 future animals, from ever being born, ever being raised, ever being killed for food. Just with 1 hour of handing out pieces of paper. It's the easiest effective thing that someone can do for animals. If you want to do something that's a little more effort, but a little more effective even, showcasing videos is possibly the most powerful tool that the animal protection movement has. Because you can't deny it, right? When you showcase videos, you know, this is what you see. No one can watch what happens to animals as standard practice on farms across the world and not be horrified. And at my organization, Farm Animal Rights Movement, this is our primary form of advocacy. And so we have shown a 4-minute documentary we call 10 Million Lives to over 300,000 people in the US in its entirety. We've shown millions of people who have watched part of it online or whatever, but 300,000 people have watched it from start to finish and filled out our pledge process afterward. And of those 300,000, over 250,000 of them actually pledged to move towards a vegan diet. So that's how effective showcasing videos is. That if you show 300,000 people something, or maybe we can scale it down and say if you show 300 people something, 250 of them are going to take an actual action that helps animals afterward. So it's, again, a little more effort than handing out a piece of paper, but it's so effective. And once we have done that, right, once someone has decided that they want to do the right thing for animals, they're going to try to move towards a vegan diet, a really great thing we can do is efforts to support new vegetarians and new vegans. Because this is actually a major area of concern. In the US, it had been suspected for a long time that there was a big attrition rate, basically, a big recidivism rate, because we knew we were reaching so many people who were saying they were going vegetarian or vegan, and we weren't seeing the total number of vegetarians and vegans grow as quickly as we thought we were going to. And so, so when these people pledged, we were wondering, what happens next? You know, why are they not staying vegetarian? Why are they not staying vegan? And how many of them are not staying vegetarian? How many are not staying vegan? And so an organization called Faunalytics, they used to be known as the Humane Research Council, they teamed up with FARM and a couple other organizations, and they did the largest marketing study in the history of the world on ex-vegetarians and ex-vegans. And what they found was somewhat disheartening. It was somewhat disappointing. What they found is that for every 6 people who explore a vegetarian or vegan diet, only 1 of them remains vegetarian or vegan fully. And so we have a lot of work to do, a lot of work to do to support these vegetarians and vegans. The good news is that most of the people that didn't stay fully vegetarian or vegan stayed partially vegetarian or vegan, so it wasn't all bad news. But learning that, we just learned this last year, and this really lit a fire for us to do a lot more work to support new vegetarians, to support new vegans. And we can skip those, it's not that important. One thing, actually I'll get to it in a second. I'll get to in a second one big way that we can support those vegetarians and those vegans. This actually, I'm sorry, I reversed these two. This one was going to be back-to-back with videos. Similar to presenting videos is presenting lectures like these ones, and I found that the rate of change is even higher for lectures than videos. So my best lecture that I ever gave to a college campus had 96% of the people that I spoke to pledge afterward to move towards a vegetarian or vegan diet. And so if you've got the time and you've got the skills to present lectures to people with these kind of videos and with the PowerPoints, it's a really, really effective way. And again, that should have gone actually before we talked about the vegan recidivism issue. So with that, a big way that we can pair our work to support vegetarians and vegans with larger, more global work is to influence policymakers. Because one thing we found is that, at least in the Western world, in the US and in Western Europe, and I'm sure it's going to be true with the growing middle class in India, who I know a lot of the young middle class are moving towards an anti-vegetarian way, And one thing that people want is they consistently want affordability and they want convenience. And they perceive vegetarianism and veganism as less affordable and less convenient, because it's not where they can get their fast food as easily and whatnot. And so work to influence corporations and influence policymakers to make vegetarianism more accessible is a really great way to help promote this message. In the US, we've been working with Subway, the largest sandwich chain in the world, to add vegan and vegetarian options, or more vegan and vegetarian options. That's being spearheaded by Compassion Over Killing. My group Farm just helped convince one of the largest ice cream chains to add a vegan ice cream option for the first time ever. And less glamorous, but probably even more important, is organizations including the Humane League and the Humane Society have been working with the companies that provide food to college campuses, like Aramark. So they're not a company that most of us have heard of because they work in the back end, providing all the food to campuses, but working with them to provide more vegan options. And so this work to influence policymakers, institutions, and corporations can be really, really effective. And going even one step beyond that, one step bigger, is obtaining media attention, right? Because we can only reach so many people ourselves. We're only going to reach so many people in the classroom, so many people with a leaflet, so many people with a video. But if we can get our message on the media, we can reach literally millions. And that's another thing that we do with our video outreach, is we don't just show it to people on the streets, but we work to get that video shown for free to people all across the country by getting the video inserted into media spots in the US. And it's, again, it's basically an almost free way to get the message out to so many more people than we ever would have gotten it out to before. And lastly, my 10th tool, my last tool for how we collectively can help strike at the roots of animal oppression is to take mass action, to go beyond the individual, beyond just telling individuals to change their habits, but into the collective, into the larger sphere. And to do things that kind of create full cultural shifts. And so I'm guessing many of us in this room know that this October 2nd is the 33rd annual World Day for Farm Animals, and the 33rd time that Farm's president, our co-founder and Holocaust survivor Alex Hershaft, will be leading a fast against slaughter. And so I'm hoping everyone in this room will be joining in this fast against slaughter on October 2nd. If you haven't already, what you can do is you can go to dayforanimals.org/pledge, and in fact, if you have smartphones, you can even do this right now. You can pledge live right here in this room to fast on October 2nd. Just a single one-day fast, but last year we had 12,000 people across the globe do it. This year we believe we're going to have over 20,000. And that will send a big message to the entire world that literally tens of thousands of us on the same day are willing to make a small sacrifice for animals because we know it's that important to us. And in fact, actually tomorrow also, I will be snapping pictures of anyone here who wants to hold up a sign that says Fast Against Slaughter, so we can put that on Farm's Facebook page if you want to have your work exposed to a global audience. I saw a small applause in the back. You can applaud more loudly if you like to. Thank you. So yeah, I'm almost done here. I wanted to not make this too long, not take too much of our time this morning, but just give us again a reminder of these tools that we have, that we can save animals on the streets with animal birth control operations. We can expose people to social media, leaflets and videos, and present lectures. We can support new vegans and vegetarians as they transition on this path. And then we can take it bigger by obtaining media attention, by influencing policymakers, and finally by joining and taking mass action for animals. Because no one wants to see this. Everyone hates this. Everyone who sees this is horrified, and we all just want to find the faster way, right? That we can go from this to this, right? And we're going to do it by striking at the roots of animal oppression. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. We have about 15 minutes for interactions. So if people have questions, or if anyone would like to supplement what what Michael has said when we have about 10-15 minutes right now. Of course, Michael has a talk coming up tomorrow as well, so we'll have continued opportunities for this interaction. But if there are any immediate,
in my interactions with some of the people in this room and with FIAPO members, I have already highlighted this. The definition of vegan is something that's taken birth around 40 years back. It's an evolved thinking and it's an improved approach towards life at large. There's one more thing which needs to be added to the vegan definition, and it's high time we do this now. There are around 1 lakh animals which get killed. Every 50% of all of the turtles, all of the tortoise in the seas has eaten that, and that's leading to their death. Every cow in the streets of India has around 10 kg of that material in the cow, and we are all responsible for it. And it's our way of living life which is contributing to their death. 500 billion plastic bags are produced every year. I think it's high time we all look at ourselves. Yes, going vegan, the current definition is pretty good, but we all also have to explore of including plastic into the vegan life. Plastic for food and plastic bags at large, plastic bottles as well, is leading to death of animals, and that I think has to be added to the vegan definition.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I support changing the definition per se, but I think I agree that taking more compassionate actions is better than taking fewer compassionate actions. Definitely. Yeah. Farm has partnered with the group A Well-Fed World. Have people here heard of A Well-Fed World? They're a group that works on kind of a combination of animal and global hunger and environmental issues, and they've been working on the plastic bag India issue a lot, and Farm's been partnering with them. And I know in the US there's been a lot of efforts in major cities to ban plastic bags completely from grocery stores and whatnot. I don't know if does India have any efforts like that to stop? Good, yeah, I support, I mean, that's great news. And certainly, I mean, we should all, I think, take as few harmful actions as possible. If we can, use fewer plastic bags and drive less often, because if we drive at all, because driving obviously contributes to pollution, which contributes to global warming, which harms animals. And so there's a lot of actions, I think, that all of us should work towards that will help more animals. But I also think it's important that when we're telling people to move towards a vegan diet, that it's got an easily definable definition, which is consuming nothing that comes from an animal, and plastic doesn't. If we were to expand veganism to include anything that hurt animals, that could get really complicated and really confusing, right? We could say that walking is no longer vegan because we're stepping on bugs, or that driving is no longer vegan because we're going to hit a bird or bug on occasion. And so again, I don't think that means we should be complicit in those actions. We shouldn't be apathetic. We should always strive to be more compassionate. But I think that stopping veganism, the definition of veganism, at things that directly use animals is wise, because it makes it obvious to people what they're initially aiming towards. But again, that would never preclude them from not using fewer plastic bags as well, I think. I know, was there a response in that corner as well before you respond? I saw a hand over there.
There's a question.
It's just a question.
Oh, it was unrelated? Well, then did you want to respond? If yours is unrelated.
Unrelated.
Unrelated. Did you want to respond first?
Michael, I have a suggestion, because there might be other questions. So why don't we take them all, and then perhaps we can have an interaction if we still have time.
Okay, sure.
Just a quick question. In your presentation, there's a statistic you mentioned about what percentage of greenhouse gases are being contributed by animal agriculture. I saw this latest documentary called Cowspiracy, and the stat in that documentary said that commercial cattle agriculture alone is contributing to over 50% of greenhouse gases. I don't know, are you familiar with that?
Did you want me to respond now, or did you want to hear more questions first?
No,
Okay. Yeah, I have heard that as well. The reason I usually use the 18% is because it comes from the United Nations, and it's very authoritative. And so when I'm presenting to college campuses and high schools, I want to use a body that everyone's heard of. And the thing is, it's such a stark number either way. When you say that cows contribute more than cars, I don't think people really notice the number you're saying anymore at that point. And usually when I'm giving that lecture, I've got way more slides on the environment. And actually, even tomorrow morning, I'll be going into a little more detail on this. But yeah, I've heard between 18 and 51%. I think they're all pretty horrifying numbers, so I just stick with the more conservative ones so that I can't get told that I'm exaggerating on behalf of the animal cause, because sometimes, at least in the US, when we bring in the other arguments like global hunger and global warming, people basically say, well, I already know you're vegan for the animals and you're just adding these other arguments to make a good case. And so I don't want to seem like someone who's twisting the facts in my favor, so I go with a slightly more conservative number. Well, you personally, but I'm not suggesting that's what you should do. That's just the approach that I've taken.
Thanks. Anybody else?
Hi. You mentioned a point here which says obtaining media attention, and you were mentioning to how to insert a video spot and which is free. Could you just give a bit of detail?
On how to get media attention?
No, you said one of the ways to get media attention is to insert a video spot. How does that happen?
Oh, what I meant was that we get our videos shown by focusing on, basically, by for free, I meant that when we show us on the media, they also show part of our video, is what I meant. And so we basically use a gimmick in the US. What we do is we go to college campuses and we pay people $1 each to watch our 4-minute video. And that gets media attention because it's a gimmick. It's interesting to them. They think it's weird. And then we don't have to pay everyone $1 who sees it on the news afterward, basically. You know, so we pay a couple hundred people $1 to watch it, and then we get thousands of people to see it for free afterward on the media. So that's what I meant by free.
Often when we talk about going vegan, soya bean is a very major alternative to milk and other stuff. But then that throws up the whole issue of genetically modified seeds. So we are going up against Monsanto, etc., etc. And so are we supporting, I mean, you know, then you get sort of thrown between two camps because you're saying, right, you know, use soya, but then soya is one of the major GM outputs.
Sure, yeah, I mean, we don't have a stance on farm on genetic modification. We just don't really want to get into that hot button issue. But having said that, my thought is that far more soy is used for cattle feed and chicken feed than is used for humans. And actually, indirectly, eating a pound of, or a quarter pound or whatever of animal product is going to eat a lot more soy. I think about 5 times more soy. It basically is used to eat the same amount of meat that is used to eat that soy directly. And the soy is way more likely to be genetically modified that's fed to the animals than the soy that we eat. You know, most, at least in the US, most of the tofu and soy milks that are marketed are genetic modification free. Because they know that the kind of people that are going to eat tofu and soy milk in the US are the same kind of people that don't want to eat genetically modified foods. But no one knows what's being fed to the cows. And so if we're trying to reduce our dependency on genetically modified soy and other crops, actually eating them directly, paradoxically, will eat a lot less of them than eating the animal products. And so that's usually how I resolve that one without having to get into the how bad is genetic modification really argument.
Thanks, Michael. You've given a great presentation. Just a quick question. What's farms' attitude or position about the effectiveness of advocating for incremental welfare changes for farmed animals as a strategy toward liberating farmed animals?
Yeah, we don't work on any of those campaigns, and we at times have actually kind of actively opposed that work. I would say at this point we're more just neutral, but think it would be a misuse of our funds. And so for those, I don't know if everyone's even totally familiar with that debate, and I don't know how big it is in India, but in the US, there is kind of a big debate in the animal rights movement about whether we should be using our energies to improve the treatment of animals or using those energies to just reduce the number of animals being raised and killed for food. And our stance is that given how costly ballot initiatives are, you know, how much money it costs to go up against big corporations, and then how small the victories end up actually being, you know, how minor the reforms are, we think that's a misuse of our time and energy. I think that if the larger groups want to go ahead and do that, there is some evidence that doing that does kind of throw a monkey wrench in animal agriculture's operations, that it makes it more difficult for them to do their job. And so we don't oppose those efforts any longer. We used to, but we don't oppose those efforts because there is some evidence that it can be aggravating for animal agriculture to have to deal with those incremental reforms. But overall, I think that it's a wiser effort. It's a wiser use of vegetarians and vegans' time to work directly on reducing the number of animals raised and killed for food, rather than just changing the treatment of those animals.
Okay, we are at time. Maybe one last one from Manjunath ji, and that's it then.
So in India, there is a lot of cattle production is there. That means government is a lot of subsidies on milk production. There is a targeted every year there is increasing of milk production, meat production, fish production. But how to can converting into the veganism is the big problem is there. Because there is a targeted for the officials or government policies. They want every year is they increasing the production, and also they given a lot of subsidies for the milk productions. So because if you want any farmer is there in a lot of indigenous breeds also going down because of this subsidies given to the this is the breeds of hybrid breeds, and also meat production, milk production is there, and also there is no lot of limited stock of veganism products. So how do we can prevent these things? And also supported these foreign agencies, a lot of WHO, that means World Health Organizations, and also some of the agencies supporting for the subsidy scheme to the World Bank. Some of the schemes are supporting to this country. So this is the biggest problem in India because of depending upon subsidies. If subsidy is given, the production also going up.
Sure, yeah. Well, I think dealing with that, that's one of the issues that I think India and the US are going to have to address probably pretty differently. You know, that's the kind of issue that those of you working in India are going to know a lot better than I will. You know, this is my first time ever being in India, and I have as much to learn from all of you as you have to learn from me. I wanted to give tools that each of us in this room could take into our communities, you know, tomorrow if we wanted to, or next week, or next month. And I think getting into, you know, provincial and national and even international politics issues is important. You know, some of us, as we move up the kind of leadership ladder, are, I hope people in this room do learn how to work on those larger governmental issues and how to solve the subsidies problems and everything. I mean, I certainly, it's something that I am intending on learning more about myself at Farm, as we see that the US is going in the right direction, and we see that India and China are in many ways following the US's lead from 30 to 50 years ago instead of the US now. We're very concerned about that, and I'm going to be putting increased of my personal energy into India and China in coming years, and maybe I'll have a better answer after that. But right now I would just say that I have as much to learn from you all as you do from me on these kind of issues, and that we can start with our communities and over the next few years try to learn a lot more about the global and bigger picture on this.